Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS current affair analysis for 6th August 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Taking Nuclear Vulnerabilities Seriously. So today is the 75th anniversary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing that happened in 1945, and what are the steps taken after this bombing and how is life after this atomic bombing. So time and again we have reiterated that we should not encourage nuclear weapon building, but as a matter of fact today we have 8 countries which are recognized as nuclear weapon states. So it is important to ensure that the spirit of non-proliferation is taken very seriously, and the idea of deterrence has rarely worked for us. Now, what is the idea of deterrence and what is the logic behind it? Say, for example, let us consider the example of US and North Korea. The reason cited by North Korea to build nuclear weapons is to tackle US's aggression. So historically, US has been involved in the Korean War. It has opposed North Korea and supported South Korea. So in order to contain US aggression, North Korea says that it is building nuclear weapons to deter US from attacking North Korea. Similar is the case with India and Pakistan. So this idea of deterrence, according to the article writer, makes us more vulnerable rather than giving confidence. There is always an element of mistrust. Now, if this idea of deterrence does not instill confidence, what else will? So, according to the author, non-proliferation is the only thing that will ensure a peaceful world. In this context, the author cites the example of 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, wherein Cuba was under the threat of an attack or occupation from USA. So Cuba was a communist country, and USA wanted to stop its leader Fidel Castro from completely converting this country into a antagonistic force in its strategic backyard. So Cuba was given nuclear missiles from Russia. So these nuclear weapons threatened the peace in this area and led to a weapons race, and this has escalated into a major tension between the two countries. So it is just sheer luck that no such accident that happened in 1945 repeated after the World War. So in this scenario, it is important to have a rules-based world order that completely removes all kinds of nuclear weapons in this world. If at all, this weapons race is only creating vulnerabilities. Now, in this context, we also have to go back into the history about nuclear diplomacy, and also let us use this opportunity to look at India's stance with respect to nuclear weapons. We will also discuss what is the nuclear doctrine of our country and what is the no first use policy. The first attempt towards non-proliferation and disarmament was the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or it is simply called NPT. In 2020, it marked the 50th anniversary of this particular treaty. However, we have to note that this is having certain structural flaws. What are those flaws? In total, in the present world, there are nearly 9 nuclear weapon states. So there are only 5 states from the World War era which are allowed to have nuclear weapons according to this treaty, and the rest 4 states, which are India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea. These states were not allowed to have weapons or fissile material, nuclear fissile material, or the raw material for building these nuclear weapons. So because of this discrimination, this treaty has not been so successful in attaining its objectives. Also, the 5 nations that are allowed to have these nuclear weapons are US, UK, France, China and Russia. So this is very important for our preliminary examination. In the same context, there is another treaty called the CTBT, or Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. We are talking about nuclear test banning. So this is a treaty which bans all kinds of nuclear explosions everywhere by everyone. So this is not even allowing the nuclear weapon states as well for testing. The treaty has not yet entered into force because of certain reasons. This is another important point for prelims. Not yet entered into force. So the signature to a treaty indicates that the country accepts the treaty. Ratification symbolizes that official sanction of a treaty to make it legally binding. India has not supported this as well because it was discriminatory in practice. So according to the renegotiated treaty, this would come into force if 44 countries would sign the ratification. So India considered this to be a attempt of violating our sovereignty, because we are denied the right to join something if we wanted, but it was ignored completely because we are not ready to negotiate on the same terms laid down by the CTBT framework. Now let us also consider the nuclear doctrine of India. So India conducted a series of nuclear tests in May 1998. So it demonstrated its capacity to use nuclear energy for military purposes through these tests. Pakistan also followed, thereby increasing the vulnerability of this region, South Asia region, for nuclear exchange. At this particular point of time, the international community was extremely critical of the nuclear tests in the subcontinent, and sanctions were also imposed on India. Also, Pakistan was also given sanctions, but they were subsequently waived off. So after this 1998 nuclear tests, we came up with a nuclear doctrine. So there was no first use policy which was existing even before this doctrine came into force, but it was formally adopted in 2003, and we came up with a policy document which is called the Nuclear Doctrine of India. This doctrine, or this document, says that nuclear weapons will only be used in retaliation. So since the adoption of our nuclear doctrine, India has consistently said that its nuclear weapons were based on retaliation only, and only in the case where deterrence has failed. So there is no first use policy, which has been reiterated through a policy document. So Pakistan, by contrast, has openly threatened India with the use of nuclear weapons multiple times. So we have to understand from all this information, coming back to the article, the authors believes that deterrence will not work. But if we have countries like Pakistan, North Korea, which always threaten the sovereignty of a country with nuclear weapons, the world will not have other choices than go for deterrence. This is my personal opinion, which I'm adding. You are free to disagree, but please post your views in the comment section below. So what could be the way forward, and what is the ultimate way in which we can stop the proliferation of this nuclear weapons? So unless and until the world comes together to create a rules based world order, which India also abides by, this would not only reduce the expenditure, defense expenditure of the world together, but it will also ensure peace and prosperity of all regions. Now, one reason that we can think of is lack of development in certain regions of the world. In the backdrop of COVID, we have seen that how interconnected our world could be. So if something happens in one part of the world, it would have a possibility in different areas. So therefore, it is important to ensure nuclear weapons are completely removed from the world. That would happen only through a rules based world order. That is the gist of this article. The second article for the day is taken from the Live Mint, and it is titled "Our Education Policy May Falter on Executive Overload." Whenever we talk about governance, it follows a certain path. Firstly, we have to design a policy and then make a law based on the parameters which are identified in this policy, then implement it, and if there are any shortcomings or misgivings in the implementation of the law, there should be a mechanism for grievance redressal. This is the basic framework of every governance system. So this article is saying that the very design of the policy is often ambitious in our context because we are not taking into consideration the capacity to implement and ensure that there is enough room for grievance redressal. So it is in the context of education policy. So let us go into the details. So recently the government has unveiled the new education policy after 34 years. So we have had critical analysis of this education policy in our previous editorial videos, but this particular editorial is not about the features of education policy. In fact, our education policy has hit almost all the right chords. There is no question about the new leash of life that this education policy has brought forth for the education system. The focus of this article is how we are going to implement this given our capacities which are facing a severe shortage. Generally, whenever we are talking about the implementation issues, there are certain common problems which are observed across every domain. What are those issues? First one is lack of funds. There is always a shortage of allocated public resources. For example, let us consider the case of health. India requires nearly 2.5 to 3% of its GDP for a decent healthcare system. But in the present scheme of things, we are hardly allocating 1 to 1.5% of GDP for healthcare, and a significant amount of that goes into salaries and administrative expenses rather than focusing on rural infra and other areas like drugs, diagnostic tests, etc., which has less burden on the pockets of a common man. Similarly, education sector is also facing an fund crunch, especially in states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, which requires significant amount of funding. Just to put things into context, southern states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana spend nearly 70,000 per student every year at higher school level. So are we getting the outcomes based on the investment spent? There is certain problem with respect to monitoring of these funds. Third one is, whenever we try to understand the problems of higher education system, there is a severe lack of knowledge of analytical capabilities as to why certain processes are not functioning. After that, there is an inadvertent delay in allocating funds. Even if a particular school is given a fund, it would reach only after half of the year passes by. That would not only delay the learning process, but it will also discourage students from joining public schools. And lastly, we have the bureaucratic overload. Now, what is this bureaucratic overload? Imagine the situation of a district collector who is under resourced and is expected to carry out huge functions. With the lack of funds, it is not fair on the part of the government to expect bureaucrats to come up with certain miracles. So local bureaucrats remain heavily under resourced relative to their responsibilities. So the major reason for this again goes back to reason number 1, where funds are either inappropriately allotted to areas where there is no accountability, or they are under resourced. So it doesn't mean that there is no intent from the bureaucracy to implement this. So to reiterate or analyze the issue, what we are lacking now is the lack of a better incentive system. So there should be a win-win situation both for the executive and also beneficiaries. So after the incentives, the other part which has been lacking in the policy is the implementation roadmap. So for example, you can use technologies like GPS navigation map, or say for example there is a feedback mechanism through a app. All this can be incorporated, and the best practices should be documented so that they can be put to use across the nation. So all these are not present in the policy document. In the national education policy, there was a national research fund. So there is a possibility that fund allocation for research under this would be driven by ideologies rather than necessities of the nation. So that should be avoided, and even this is a shortcoming of the policy. The next one is, we are talking about a GDP percentage of 6%. If we go by the recent trends, nothing of that sort has been made clear by the government that it has any intention to increase the resources for education. How is the government going to come up with such a staggering amount? That should also be clearly laid down. And lastly, the most important point is about social mobility, because education is treated as a medium or a tool for social mobility across the world, not just in India. Now, when we're talking about the impact of education on social mobility, there is only a vague statement that the policy would closely scrutinize and respect the marginalized society. So, how are we going to do that? We have clearly seen that reservation has only limited impact when it talks about social mobility, even though the condition has significantly improved in the previous few generations. Now we have to go beyond this idea of reservation, according to the writer, and talk about a society where we really see the empowerment of marginalized societies. That aspect is also not addressed clearly in the education policy. So these are the issues with our education policy, mainly relating to implementation mechanism. So the author believes that if all these aspects are addressed comprehensively, then it would become a foolproof mechanism. That is the gist of this article. That's it for the day. Thank you.